What ayah are we on now?
We are, I believe, let's look into it, right? That is basically right there. ما قلت لهم إلا ما أمرتني به أن اعبدوا الله ربي وربكم. Is that what we're doing? No, right there. Sorry, this one. So we're doing 116 and 117, just basically reviewing 116, what we did yesterday, and then going for 117. Hopefully we could do a lot today. Let's look into it, inshallah. وإذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم أأنت قلت للناس اتخذوني وأمي إلهين من دون الله. And we talked about this clause right there, whether that was an interrogative clause or whether that was an informative clause. And we said that majority of the scholars actually consider that that wasn't an interrogative clause, meaning that this isn't to interrogate Prophet Isa alayhi salam himself, but that was coming in an interrogative clause to bring about the informative clause within it, the inference to basically tell those that had claimed that Prophet Isa alayhi salam had claimed or that he had said that he was the son of God or that his mother was the mother of the son of God, etc. And ta'ala Allahu amma yushrikun. And that, of course, this is coming in that sense or at least in that clause, but it contains within it that it is to inform those that had claimed that Prophet Isa alayhi salam or his mother contained any deity in him, and therefore the response of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, قال سبحانك ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق. That Prophet Isa alayhi salam, within this statement, there was subhanak. In other words, Prophet Isa alayhi salam basically giving the glory to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by giving and submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's izzah. So that is to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's honor, to submit and recognize. Now, it's important to mention when we say submitting to the izzah, that is actually coming in, and we were talking about it yesterday with what Tirmidhi had said, that to understand and to submit to al-ubudiyya is what actually brings in and induces a better understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's asma and sifat, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names and attributes. So when he says subhanak, that's a way of saying, yes, there's no one like unto you, but the inference is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the izzah or all the magnificence goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the inference. Okay, so remember, if we're seeing a form of submission in ubudiyya, a form of submission in recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, in the names and attributes, that induces our understanding or an understanding of ibadah. So it all goes kind of like in a circle. Okay, if you truly understand the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, you really recognize that there's no one like unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power and powers. That's going to induce that you fall in khushu' in your ibadah, because you recognize that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's glory is beyond all, then what that brings is a form of khushu', you feeling that submission, you feeling that humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that brings in the taqwa. So there we go. So we've got understanding the name, we've got what that brings in a form of ibadah, and then the implication in action. That's why the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned in the hadith, if that person's لو if القلب خشع لخشعت جوارحه. If the heart basically goes into that embracement for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence, then you would see the implication and you would see the impact of in the effect basically on that person's behavior, on that person's principle. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ, for example, was teaching and preaching to the Sahaba how we live our Islam by giving certain keys. For example, he was teaching لا تغضب. Don't get into this anger. Teach yourself how to control the anger. By learning how to control your anger, you're then learning principle. You're then learning how to tame down your emotions in order to submit to the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why would I tame my anger? I would tame my anger because I would know and recognize that anger is going to result in probably damaging other people's properties, probably damaging or probably being aggressive on other people, maybe showing aggression on other people's, maybe name calling, probably physically harming them, probably damaging certain things that we might not realize, damaging certain social relations and so forth. So the Prophet ﷺ was teaching us certain things that relate to changing our principles, changing our akhlaq by learning how to tame down our own emotions, by letting our emotions submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you look at Subhanak, this is a way to respond by recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence is beyond. So he is basically right there taking the moment to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, Al-Aziz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, Al-Jabbar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There's nothing like unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, Subhanak, there's no way that I can be. That is Prophet Isa alayhi salam saying, there's no way that I can be at a level or in any comparison as you, Lord Almighty. ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق. We said when Prophet Isa alayhi salam said, I would not be capable of saying anything unless you had given me the permission to do so, is a form of saying that my mission and my behavior and my duty and what I would apply in life is basically going to be what you had conducted me to do, what you had ordered me to do. It was you giving me the order. Therefore, I basically do the implementation. I basically am at your service. I basically am Abdullahi wa Rasuluh. I'm basically the servant and the prophet of Allah Almighty. There's absolutely no way that I would have the power or the ability or even have in any shape or form the will to attempt to do such a thing. And that's why he would say right there, ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق. That's basically a level of submission in action. So that's basically that توحيد العبودية. توحيد العبودية. Remember, there are three kinds of tawheed. You've got the توحيد الربوبية, توحيد الألوهية, and توحيد الأسماء الصفات. So you've got the توحيد العبودية, basically coming in with Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. You recognize that the Lord Almighty is the only God to be worshipped, then therefore you would recognize that your behavior is supposed to go in the same direction as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered. Now, in Subhanak, that would come in as Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. That's basically recognizing the essence of the Lord Almighty. There's nothing like unto his essence. In kuntu qultuhu faqad alimtah. Now that's coming in with an asma wa sifat. If I would have said anything like that, you would have known it. That's basically submitting in al-asma wa sifat, and particularly the name al-alim. The name al-alim, that you are al-alim, you are the one that is all-knowing, and if I would have done something like that, you are the only one that basically encompasses all the knowledge. Therefore, there's absolutely no way that I can in any shape or form basically go beyond what you had ordered me to do, or even absolutely no way that I would have the ilm that you encompass. So he says, تَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِي وَلَا أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِكَ. Now, you would know what is in me, and I would not necessarily know what you conceal. What you conceal, whether we're speaking about akhirah, whether we're speaking about dunya, whether we're speaking about the past, whether we're speaking about the future, whether we're speaking about the present, etc. And that's ما في نفسك. It's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ما في نفسك to mean like our nafs. No, at the end, the word nafs can be a metaphor. The word nafs could also be something that encompasses several meanings. In other words, it is a comprehensive word and can carry multiple meanings. So therefore, we cannot whatsoever use that as an evidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a ruh. Okay, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a ruh, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is immortal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-hayy al-qayyum. He is al-hayy al-qayyum. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an ever-living. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is immortal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-qayyum. He is self-efficient, therefore does not depend on anyone. Therefore, we cannot whatsoever claim that something else can be whatsoever as God, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that is as a God. He is the only one that is Al-Aziz, Al-Qadir. He is the only one that is the self-efficient and nothing else. Every living thing depends on another living thing or another thing for its existence. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not depend on anything or anyone. Okay, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ. And the Lord Almighty, of course, here Prophet Isa alayhi salam would say, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ. You are the one that has all the knowledge about al-ghayb. Now let's go back, even though that was definitely a summary, but I thought it would be a good idea to go to Tafseer al-Qurtubi and see what other scholars had said in regards to that. سبحانك ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق. Basically, right there, this ayah, within this area, he basically started out with a tasbih before giving the response, and that's to announce right there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence basically goes beyond, and it is to submit to his magnificence, and certainly to also show that he is in fear. That's basically why, because the word tasbih, subhanak, carries within it the inference that you recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing like unto him, and therefore that is to build a taqwa. What is a taqwa? A taqwa is basically one, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence, that's the moment that the person builds in it taqwa, builds in the fear to not trespass and not transgress the limit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set. And basically from that point, what are we doing? Subhanallah. So if a person is struggling, for example, with anger issues, continue. Whenever you're angry, say Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. What does that help you with? That is supposed to build within you. If you think that by demonstrating or by probably projecting anger, and by projecting anger, you're going to get other people basically afraid of you, the Prophet ﷺ was teaching us that to control this anger, you're going to basically make wudu, turn off the anger by making wudu, because this anger is nothing but burning fire within you. To control it, what are you going to do? You basically want to turn that fiery anger within you. So one of the other tasbih, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. What does it do? It basically projects within you the recognition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the major one that we would fear, and number two, that all the power goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a dhikr. Whenever you're going through this type of anger, what are you going to do? You're basically going to make as part of that Subhanallah, Subhanallah, just as Prophet Isa alayhi salam was basically right there projecting this response to the question of interrogation. Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Okay. ويقال إن الله
I
تعالى
love that.
Yeah, it was, you know, I know
I
it's,
just never noticed that
go
he
ahead.
said, I just never noticed this point you're making, subhanAllah.
Yeah, subhanallah. I mean, it's important, you know, when I guess so many different things that might happen. Let's say you lost your rizq, say Ya Razzaq. If, for example, the person is going through maybe an issue of illness, it's always remembering. Just remember when we make الدعاء اللهم رب الناس أذهب البأس واشفنا أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاك واشفني شفاء لا يغادر سقما. Notice how many times we use the word shifa and the word shafiya as basically the root. And that's in order to bring in that repetition is basically going to induce within you a certain behavior, a certain feeling, a certain vision, and therefore what you're going to be projecting, whether it's the power of healing meaning you get healed, not you healing others necessarily, or it could be you healing others by perhaps making a ruqyah, and it's by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That could happen too. Okay, so now we're right there displaying, without us realizing, by the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're basically using that repetition, whether it's in tasbih or whether it's using the repetition, ishfini shifa'an la yughadiru saqama. We're using the word shifa constantly in order to basically produce within us that faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He's capable of basically doing that. Okay, let's see right there. ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق, and certainly that's in order to say, well, I would not have the right to say that because you are the Lord Almighty and I am not a Lord, and I am, the inference is that I would basically be your servant. If you are the Lord, then I would be your servant. Now that comes in as basically توحيد العبودية. Just keep on that one. Now let's look at this one. تعلم ما في نفسي ولا أعلم ما في نفسك. He said basically what that is saying, that you would know what's in me and I would not know what's in you, but that doesn't necessarily mean what's in you personally, but this is to basically give the inference that تعلم ما في غيبي ولا أعلم ما في غيبك. You would know basically my past, or what is unseen, or whether it is what I conceal, but I wouldn't know what you would be concealing. You would know what is considered as the unseen, but I would not know the unseen that you would be concealing. Or it can also mean تعلم ما أريد. You would know what I would basically aim at, or what I attempt to do, but I would not know what you would attempt to do. Or you would know what's in my private, or private, not private part, but this is in my private, what I would conceal within me, that is. And I would not know what you conceal within you, because that is the word an-nafs. Let me just stop at the word nafs for a bit. For the word an-nafs, just like when we talked about ruh, it can have multiple meanings. Same thing, the word an-nafs in Lugha Arabiya can actually have multiple meanings, and it's not just one meaning. Okay, so we cannot necessarily assume that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a nafs like us, because that would simply mean kufr. Okay, that would be kufr. To believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a nafs like our nafs, that's kufr, because our nafs is basically something that is mortal. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is immortal. So we would get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us life, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is al-hayy al-qayyum, laysa kamithlihi shay. We just leave it at that. Okay, and therefore the other scholars, they basically said, well, based on the word تعلم ما في نفسي ولا أعلم ما في نفسك, this is not whatsoever to assume that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a nafs like our nafs, but this is in the comprehensive meaning of a nafs. It was also saying تعلم ما في نفسي, meaning you would know what happened in this dunya, but I would not know what will happen in what your plans are for the akhirah. Okay, now here al-Qurtubi said a very nice word, and he said والمعنى في هذه الأقوال متقارب. He said all those meanings are really similar and identical in many ways, that they pretty much give the same inference, they pretty much give the same at least conclusion, whether it's we're speaking about what's in private or what's in the past, or whether what I basically concealing my intentions, my attempts, etc., all of that. And in the end, it's basically the conclusion, the result is that Prophet Isa would basically say, well, I don't know what is in your knowledge. I would not know what you would attempt. I do not encompass the ilm that you have. And that's why he said, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّمُ الْغُيُوبِ. So looking at that, when we see وَلَا أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِكَ, the scholars that wanted to interpret the word nafsik, well, they said, here it is. You could put a semicolon right there. And this, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ, you are the one that knows all the unseen. They said, well, that is why we would interpret in nafs or nafsik in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it is relating to either knowing the past, knowing the future, or knowing the unseen. Why? Because he said, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ, you are the one that knows all the unseen. And therefore, it's kind of like I would say, well, you're the great cook. Well, that means, what do I want you to do? I want you to cook. Okay, if I'm telling you you're the great cook, it makes no sense for me to tell you you're the great cook. Now you can sew me, I don't know, a hijab. No, this is irrelevant. So therefore, what would be relevant for us to do the tafsir for the nafsik is that it is in relationship with the rest of the sentence, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ, meaning that you are the one that knows all the unseen. So therefore, the nafsik relates to the completion of the sentence, relates to al-nafs, meaning what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans for al-akhirah. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically rules in al-akhirah or rules in al-ghaib. Al-ghaib is not exclusive to al-akhirah, because al-ghaib can also include the past, can include now, can include the future, can include the different details. All of that would be ghaib. So in the end, when he says إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ and لَا أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِكَ, that is to tell us that there's nothing like unto the Lord Almighty, and that all the different hidden details are basically only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And we could see even in the New Testament, when Prophet Isa alayhi salam, according to the New Testament, was asked about when Judgment Day was going to happen, and he said only the Godfather knows. So therefore, even within their edited scripture, it basically still contains some information for them to see and recognize that Prophet Isa alayhi salam was a human and was basically the prophet of the Lord Almighty and not God in any shape or form. Let's see. ما قلت لهم إلا ما أمرتني به أن اعبدوا الله ربي وربكم. Okay. And ما قلت لهم إلا ما أمرتني به. I only said what you had ordered me to tell them, and that is at-tawheed. So that's why we were talking about at-tawheed, whether it's tawheed in al-ibadah or whether it's a tawheed in the message. So here we go. Let's do it again. So whether it's tawheed in the message that he was delivering, in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had delivered onto him through Jibreel alayhi salam, or whether that was that he is now demonstrating tawheed in basically tawheed al-ubudiyyah, that he basically did not act based on his own choices, based on his own will, but he submitted his will to the will of the Lord Almighty. That's the key, that he had submitted his will to the will of the Lord Almighty. وَكُنْتُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا. Okay, now we're going to the following ayah. Now we're going to the following ayah. Let's see right there with the following ayah what this basically says. We're going to delete all of this. Here we go. ما قلت لهم. The only thing that I had ordered them to do is ما أمرتني به. So this is very similar to ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق. So what did he say? He said, I only said what you had ordered me to say. What was it that I ordered you to say? Here we go, colon, right there. أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ رَبِّي وَرَبَّكُمْ. To that they should worship Allah Almighty, my Lord and your Lord. وَكُنْتُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا مَا دُمْتُ فِيهِمْ. And I was a witness amongst them as long as I was around them. And فَلَمَّا تَوَفَّيْتَنِي. And when you had put me to sleep or put me to death, you were the one that was ar-raqib. What is ar-raqib? Why didn't he say just a shaheed? He said, كُنْتَ أَنْتَ الرَّقِيبَ عَلَيْهِمْ. You were the one that basically had all your supervision on them. Is Prophet Isa alayhi salam right now from the heavens looking down at the people to see what they're doing? The answer is no. Is Prophet Muhammad sallam looking down at people to see what they're doing? The answer is no. Are they getting information while they're in the grave on what's happening and what the people are doing? The answer is no. If my father or mother dies, etc., are they going to be here somehow looking down at me, kind of like Lion King, where Mufasa was looking down at his own Simba and basically giving him that vibe and protecting him? The answer is this is kufr, this is shirk to believe that. Okay? Not the prophets, not the messengers, not your father, not your mother, not your loved one, not the saints and not the kings. No one basically is ar-raqib. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ar-raqib. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that is ar-raqib, that is basically doing that supervision. Basically, with his supervision, he is giving the protection. He is basically making certainly the accountability as well. He is basically controlling all the information and all the hifz. So when you're looking at al-raqib can mean the one to supervise, in other words, to keep track of what people are doing, and two, to also then in that situation have the power to hold certain people accountable in this dunya or in akhirah. That's al-raqaba. Al-raqaba is actually coming in, al-raqaba meaning basically the root is raquba. Raquba actually means to look closely. Okay? To look closely. Okay? So when you're looking closely, why are you looking closely? Are you looking closely to protect? Or are you looking closely to hold others accountable? Or are you looking closely to basically contain everything? It's all the three. It's all the three. That's why you would say the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they support one another. So when you're talking about a raqib, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a raqib, where without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's raqaba, without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's supervision, you would not have been protected. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's supervision, you would not have been capable of considering all the different things that surround you, that they're surrounded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ihata, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's encompassment. Al-ihata comes with al-raqaba. Al-raqaba comes with al-hifz as well, comes with the protection. All of that. كنت أنت الرقيب عليهم. It also contains that there's a certain military. So this is a military wording because الرقابة would usually be the military, and that's why وأنت على كل شيء شهيد, and you are the one that is basically supervising or at least witnessing everything. And therefore, now we go, in other words, here's the part about keeping track of everything. Then there's the أنت على كل شيء شهيد. Now this is the witness. And finally, إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك. This is right there to lay out that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to be, the one to rule. The one to rule. Okay, let's look at a couple words in this ayah and to break it down to learn further. Let's see. وَكُنْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا أي حَفِيظًا بِمَا أَمَرْتُهُم. So كنت عليهم, كنت عليهم شهيدا. I was there حفيظا بما أمرتهم. In other words, I kept track. I tried to maintain all the different things that basically I ordered them to do. Did they do it? Are they applying it right? Are they understanding the message? That's basically the Prophet's mission, to deliver the message, to explain it, and certainly to let you know how to apply it, whether learning how to apply it, whether in demonstration themselves, the prophets themselves applying it so you could see how it's practiced, or whether it's giving you the information, or whether it's basically demonstrating it in action to show you that it is possible for a human being to basically embrace the principles of the Lord Almighty, and therefore this is not impossible. It is within the person's abilities, within the person's capacities, and therefore this is how it's done. So, حفيظا بما أمرتهم ما دمت فيهم, as long as I was basically around them, and وقت دوامي فيهم, when I was around them, I was capable of being the witness on what they were doing. فلما توفيتني. Now, here's the question. When you look at the word توفيتني, does that mean Prophet Isa alayhi salam died? What does it actually mean? The word, look, توفيتني. How do we understand that? Okay, so there are differences of opinions between scholars. Does that mean he was put to death before he was risen? Or does that mean he was risen and then put to some kind of a sleep? What does it actually mean? Well, in order for us to understand what the word means, we basically have to put in a couple pieces together. Number one is that according to the hadith, Prophet Isa alayhi salam is going to come back to this dunya. Does that mean he's going to go through a form of resurrection? Because anyways, if we are going to interpret this one as tawafaytani to mean that he had died, well, how did he die? When did he die? Did the disciples get the chance to bury him? Did they see any of this? The answer is this is all part of al-ghaib, but certainly the person that was put on the cross, what we know and what we are sure of is that it was not Isa alayhi salam. Was Prophet Isa alayhi salam risen in body or in ruh? Was he risen in body or was he risen in his spirit? What is exactly happened at the end? What we would know is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically risen him, رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, because that's what the ayah is saying, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had risen him. Did he رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, meaning that in body and soul? Or was that رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ to mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had risen him in order for others not to harm him? Did he basically give him another space, is it on another perhaps sky? All of that is al-ghaib. We just know the ayah says, بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had risen him. Is this a metaphor? Is this physically? Is this literally? Where was this rafa' at? Was it in some kind of heavens? Well, we do have another hadith that Prophet Isa alayhi salam was in one of those heavens. Remember the story of al-Isra, all right? And we also know that Prophet Isa alayhi salam is basically going to come back down, and he's basically going to be killing a Dajjal. Is Prophet Isa alayhi salam, when he comes back, is he going to be reborn? Or is he going to be coming back in a miraculous coming, coming, a second coming? What does this look like at the end? We just know that Prophet Isa alayhi salam will come back. Prophet Isa alayhi salam, and it's a miraculous return, and therefore Prophet Isa alayhi salam, with this miraculous return, if it's a miraculous return from the very beginning, rafa'allahu alayhi ilayhi, we're speaking about thousands of years before. Well, it wouldn't be hard on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to basically return him, whether it's returning him as a miraculous return, kaboof, there he is, kun fayakun, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will basically return him, kun and fayakun, right there, he's on earth, and that's all that basically takes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kun fayakun. Okay, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through some kind of a miraculous birth like the first time. Okay, so when we see فَلَمَّا رَفَعْتَنِي إِلَى السَّمَاءِ, so in other words, فَلَمَّا تَوَفَّيْتَنِي could also mean, based on another ayah, that when Prophet Isa alayhi salam basically said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. All right, so Al-Hasan had explained that al-wafat, this word in Lugha Arabiya, so we're going to we're speaking about the root now. Let's see. So al-wafat can, in Lugha Arabiya, that is this verb right here, can actually come in three different wordings and three different interpretations. Number one, the first interpretation could be that this is relating to death. So when we say tawaffaytani, that no, he had literally died, just as it is equivalent in the word Allahu yatawaffa al-anfusa hina mawtiha, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically puts the nafs to death when it dies. In other words, يَتَوَفَّى الْأَنفُسَ حِينَ مَوْتِهَا. In other words, as if death basically comes to the person, and then the nafs is basically stripped away, which is the tool for life, and that's basically to announce the person's end of time, for them at least. The second meaning of wafa is an-nawm, is basically sleep, and that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ بِاللَّيْلِ, and he is the one, يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ بِاللَّيْلِ, يَتَوَفَّاكُم, notice that this is the same meaning. So the word wafat could mean sleep. In other words, according to this interpretation, so فَلَمَّا تَوَفَّيْتَنِي, in other words, when you had put me to sleep, based on the other ayah in Surah Al-An'am that basically said يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ بِمَعْنَى النَّوْمِ وَالَّذِي يُنِيمُكُمْ. All right, now the other one is الوفاة بمعنى الرفع, just like يا عيسى إني متوفيك and وَرَافِعُكَ إِلَيْهِ, and I will raise you to me. So therefore, when we're looking at يَا عِيسَى إِنِّي مُتَوَفِّيكَ وَرَافِعُكَ إِلَيْهِ, that basically this is to say that مُتَوَفِّيكَ بِمَعْنَى رَافِعُكَ, بِمَعْنَى I'm going to be raising you. Okay, كُنْتَ أَنْتَ الرَّقِيبَ. So kunta anta, let's see right here. So kunta anta, this anta would basically make like a confirmation within the sentence. You are a raqib. So you are basically the one to be in supervision, be watching all of this. And therefore, this is very similar Okay, when we're speaking, وَأَنْتَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ, you know what I had said, you know what they had said. So basically, you are, when we say عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, you are basically the witness on everything. What is everything to constitute of? So everything would mean everything that I had said and everything that they had said, or even responded, or even did they act based on according to the words that you had ordered me to apply to, basically to reveal onto them. And did they apply it or did they not apply it? How did they respond to the message? And simply, this is وأنت على كل شيء شهيد. خرج موسى عن ابن عباس. I want you to look at this one. I don't know. Yeah, so we'll stop right there. خرج مسلم عن ابن عباس. Sorry, not Musa, but Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ قام فينا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خطيبا بموعظة فقال يا أيها الناس إنكم تحشرون إلى الله. In another, of course, when it's in between parentheses, that means in the particular manuscript that the author was using did not have the missing word حفاة. عراة غرلا كما بدأنا أول خلق نعيده وعدا علينا إنا كنا فاعلين. ألا وإن أول الخلائق يكسى يوم القيامة إبراهيم عليه السلام. ألا وإنه سيجاء برجال من أمتي فيؤخذ بهم ذات الشمال فأقول يا ربي أصحابي فيقال إنك لا تدري ما أحدثوا بعدك فأقول كما قال العبد الصالح وكنت عليهم شهيدا ما دمت فيهم فلما توفيتني كنت أنت الرقيب عليهم وأنت على كل شيء شهيد إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك وإن تغفر لهم فإنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. قال فيقال لي إنهم لم يزالوا مدبرين مرتدين على أعقابهم منذ فارقتهم. Let's translate this hadith. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically says, "O people, you will be united with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." Okay, "O people, you'll be united with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala," right? In other words, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ura, naked. Ghurla. Ghurla means not circumcised. In other words, you'll go back to the same original organic creation you were in. ألا وإن أول الخلائق يكسى يوم القيامة إبراهيم. The first one on Judgment Day to basically be covered and dressed on Judgment Day is Ibrahim عليه السلام. And he said, ألا وإنه سيجاء برجال من أمتي. It will happen that a group of the men from my nation would be brought to me, and then they would be snatched from right and left, and he would cry out, "Oh Lord Almighty, but they're my companions." But then it would be responded to him, "You don't know what they had done after you." So I would say, فأقول كما قال العبد الصالح. So I would say exactly like the servants of the pious servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he would say basically this quote of this ayah that we're working on. And then he would be told, إنهم لم يزالوا مدبرين. He would be told that these people were basically turning away from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, مرتدين على أعقابهم. مرتدين على أعقابهم is a metaphor, meaning that they were returning to what they had actually started out with. And this is really scary, and this is really sad, that sometimes a person can be on the level of faith and then perhaps give up on faith because of the influences that surround the person or for different reasons. So at the end of the day, of course, in the Quran, it's always asking us not to fall within the steps of those that had basically left the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did not abide by the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, when we see وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Okay, so this is where we're going to end up at, inshallah, because I know you need to all sleep. So inshallah, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
جزاك الله خير.
وإياكم. So this is it. إن شاء الله. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. نشهد أن لا إله